What's up? This is Adam from Orthodox from Nashville, Tennessee, and you are watching Heavy New York.
Heavy New York!
What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York. We are back at the St. Vitus Basement, and today we are here with Adam of Orthodox. Thanks for being here today, man. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you here as well. It's going to be a violent night, 2 nights in a row. You guys killing it at St. Vitus, and Forced and Creeping Death and Exhumed just played yesterday. This place can't catch a break.
Yeah, I am envious of anybody that got to see Enforced and Creeping Death 100%.
Yeah, but it's so awesome to have you here. Congrats on signing with Century Media Records. We got the new single Body and Soul coming out. Is Body and Soul maybe a good representation of like the direction you're going into after Let It Take Its Course, or is there a lot more sides of Orthodox we're going to discover for the new album?
I think the new album, so Body and Soul is kind of, we basically, the way that we figured out what single we wanted to release as our like debut with Century Media, we had like a bunch of songs that we had ready for the album, and kind of sat down and looked at all of them and figured out like which one is kind of the best gateway between what you've heard and what's coming. So I think Body and Soul is a really good representation of like really similar things that, or not necessarily similar, but familiar sides of Orthodox that have been displayed, as well as kind of peering into what's coming. I would say the new album, the best word I can use to describe it is it's just a lot bigger.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah.
And like, because I remember the first time I heard Let It Take Its Course with a song like Remorse and I Could Show You God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those songs are relentless and whatnot. So like, you are going to maintain the brutality, but you're going to like expand on that a little bit more is the best way you could say?
I think it's just a little, I think the best way to describe it is just that there's undoubtedly the heaviest things we've ever done on this next record. Laughably so, I would say. But also just the overall execution is just a lot more mature, and there's a lot more. There's more parts throughout the songs that it's not just like a song where there's one part that you remember. That we made it a very big point to have a lot of memorable moments throughout each song, so that the listenability is a lot easier, and just the approach is a lot more focused as opposed to chaotic and almost niche that Let It Take Its Course was.
Was there like maybe an underlying or overall preconceived idea of what you wanted the new album to sound like, or was there also maybe a lot of improvising and trial and error?
So the coolest thing about Body and Soul, as well as, honestly, I should have mentioned this in the first question, but Body and Soul is the first single put out that is actually written by all 4 of us, as opposed to just me or just Austin. And so this whole record, every single song, we all had inputs on. And so I think that is one of the coolest facets of what is to come, is that this is the first, even though, this group of people has been around since we started doing the press and such for Let It Take Its Course, this is the first real representation of this group as a creative collective, as opposed to where Let It Take Its Course was mainly me writing a lot of stuff, and then Austin came in and wrote a couple of really good songs for it as well. And so with the new album, I would say in terms of what we were going for, it was kind of just like we all knew what direction we wanted to go, and we knew that with Century Media, the reach is really far, and we wanted to make sure we wrote something that was still really true to us, but would be accessible and approachable for people that were hearing us, and maybe we're the first band of our kind that they've heard.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, your music is very brutal, but I think it's also very welcoming. You know what I mean? There's some people who may, like, listen to, like, a Morbid Angel or a Deicide or something like that and be like, oh, this is a little too much for me. But I think Orthodox has, like, the brutality, but it almost has, like, a welcoming feel to it.
I'll take that. Yeah. I've never thought of my deepest, darkest thoughts as welcoming, but that's musically, that's a great compliment. So
that's a great quote. That should be the headline of this interview. I never thought my deepest, darkest thoughts would be so welcoming.
Sure. Yeah. That's actually you saying it sounds better than me saying it, but
that's the journalist.
There we go.
Yep. But and you mentioned that like this was a very collaborative effort. Every member had an input. If people were to go back and listen to Let It Take Its Course, and they got to know you guys very well, would they be able to tell, okay, this was written by you, or this was written by?
I would say, I think you could even do that between our first LP, Sounds of Loss, and Let It Take Its Course, because that album was written by me and a guy named Tyler Williams, who now plays bass in Counterparts. Tyler is a phenomenal guitarist, and we both kind of just went all in on like what's the weirdest shit we could do, drawing from like our influences, and then Tyler left the band after that album dropped so that he could focus on Counterparts. And so Let It Take Its Course was mainly me sitting with our producer Daniel Colombo, who produced the first 2 LPs, Let It Take Its Course and Sounds of Loss, and basically me giving the ideas and him showing me what was possible on guitar because I can't play it. And there's a very notable difference between somebody who is imagining song structure versus somebody like Austin who can play virtually everything you can imagine on guitar.
Oh, wow.
So the level of complexity and the overall just the fact that it's a collective of 4 minds as opposed to just mine is it just makes it a much broader spectrum that we grab everything from. So every band always says like, oh, this LP, this next release is the best we've ever done. Like, no, this is legitimately no contest the best record we're ever going to put out, but to this date have done. So.
And kind of signing with Century Media, too, having a great team. Huge shout-out to Sonia and Claire and everybody involved with Century Media. But, like, it almost seemed like they've also been at the forefront of signing, like, a lot of new heavy bands. I mean, just last night we saw Enforced and Bewitcher, but, you know, they have Lorna Shore now and having OG bands like Aborted and whatnot. It almost seems like they're the perfect label to have your back, right?
It's cool because the scene that we come from, this band started in was predominantly, like, the hardcore scene. And, you know, we've gradually written more and more metallic stuff as we've gotten into it. Now, I mean, if you were to put us under a label, it would be more like a metalcore label in terms of what we sound like. So to be able to sign with a label that has always been, like, metal is a very cool thing because it encompasses so many different bands that we usually wouldn't share any common ground with.
Yeah.
Like, I would never assume that we'd be on the same level or same label as Body Count, or Three Teeth, or Mayhem.
Yeah.
But it's it's all under the same umbrella, so it's really cool that they are able to recognize where the roots come from, and then also like what the roots produce.
And at the same time, they've also have a lot of bands that are like, they have Lacuna Coil, they have Fozzy, they have Buckcherry, which I would love.
Yeah, I forgot Buckcherry.
So like, it almost seems like they have a very broad label as well. It seems like they're open-minded to anything.
Yeah, that's also a really cool side of it is that, I mean, the whole, like, every person that's ever spoken about how do you end up with a lot of money is you have your hands in multiple pots, and you make sure you're pulling from all sorts of different sources. And I mean, we're friends with Lorna Shore, but we sound absolutely nothing like them, but we're under the same label. And so it just that's a prime example of like, oh, here's this insane deathcore band, here's this really interesting new metalcore band. Then you've got, again, bands like you said, Lacuna Coil, Venom Prison, all these different things that are just like Frozen Soul, Sanguisugabog. Like, it's just
That's how you say their name?
Sanguisugabog, yeah.
I might have to interview them soon, and I've been literally like rehearsing just saying their name.
Forward to that interview. Those are some characters, man. I don't know them personally, but 2 of our members are from Ohio, and they know them. And I just recently saw them for the first time, and yeah, that should be a really fun one.
Yeah, I'm just rehearsing their name.
No clue what it means, but yeah, it's.
I know that sangue is blood in Spanish or something like that.
Okay.
So, but I have no idea. Going to like your songwriting process. So, do you always need to hear music before you come up with lyrics, or do you sometimes have like a concept in mind and that could help influence the sound of the song?
The last few records has been predominantly. I guess the way that it usually works is I'll have an idea come to my mind and I'll put it in my notes app, or I'll have like a line. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That would sound really cool, so on and so forth. And a lot of times, like the one-liners that are really catchy, they don't really establish any sort of context until I'm writing to a song, and then I can kind of deliver what it is that is building what that means. So, I guess actually really everything for this band has always been, give me the song and I'm going to figure out what sounds best around the music. And, that way it's a little easier to, see that right here in this part of the song you need a strong line, or this really heavy part either needs something really deep or it needs nothing at all. Like, you're able to actually dissect where you're supposed to write something as opposed to trying to refit an already structured piece around it.
And like, in order to get that inspiration to write the lyrics, does inspiration like strike out of the blue, or do you almost have like a usual place that you like to go to that like maybe to cultivate ideas?
For me, especially just because all of our songs, I'm literally just yelling and acting as weird and, unhinged as I can. That's kind of just the whole idea behind my performance. It's a lot of it has come from kind of digging up things that I've gone through, but then after the last, 2 LPs of writing that, it was kind of like let's step out of that range and just look at what is troubling as opposed to specifically what troubles me. In regards to where that strikes, it was more so just kind of something would hit me out of nowhere and I'd write it down, or there were times where I'd sit at my desk and force myself to write something, or otherwise there's a coffee shop in Nashville called Humphrey Street that I've written a lot of songs in. Yeah. So it's really just a matter of it's not necessarily any sort of time and place. I guess to answer your short question really long, it is very random. So.
And I imagine inspiration strikes at the most inconvenient times.
Most often, yeah. It's I'll have an idea for a riff and I'll need to hum it into my voice memos, and I'm on the phone for work or something, and I'm like, can you shut up and let me finish this and get what really matters in here? But
yeah. And do you want the music to be open to interpretation, or do you try to maybe engage the listener into the subject matter as much as the music?
A lot of my lyrical influences come from people like Aesop Rock, who's a really deeply metaphoric rapper, or Serge Tankian or Keith Buckley, from System of a Down and Every Time I Die, who are significantly metaphoric. So a lot of my stuff is trying to deliver a metaphor in an approachable manner to where what I feel can be seen clearly, but realistically, nobody goes through the same thing the same way. Yeah. So I personally, whatever people want to interpret for themselves is more important to the listener, but I'm always open to share what my interpretation meant.
Of course. And I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I understand when an artist says they want it to be open to interpretation, but saying, oh, it's whatever you want it to be, is almost kind of like a cop-out. People want to know what it is going through the mindset of that listener, and people want to know what you were thinking, and I think that creates more of a bond between the listener and the artist as well.
Yeah, I fully agree. Some of my favorite artists do that same answer, and I'm like, dude, you were so specific in what the hell you're saying here, and I have no clue what it's even talking about, so how are you going to tell me it's up for my interpretation?
Yeah, of course. And I think both literally and metaphorically, it's going to have the same sort of effect.
Yep.
You ready for the most difficult question of the whole interview?
Sure.
How do you know when a song is done?
Man, the only reason that's difficult is because there's no way to speak that out. Because, realistically, when you're really getting down to an album, you start getting the songs together, you realize oh shit, we're going long, it's running too long. But a lot of the time, it's kind of at least for our group, we're very set on okay, this part's really cool. We need to bring this back and maybe bring a chorus in here, and then we can build up into this, and then this can come here, and then Austin, you can write something crazy to end it. So really, in terms of, for us at least, it's very much a feeling. It's just okay, this is the perfect way to end this, because if we're going to try to beat that, it almost makes the whole impact of this irrelevant.
Yeah, and too much, it's you can always cook a steak more, but once it's well done,
exactly,
you can't go back.
Can't go back.
So always good to just kind of, I'd rather have a song end too quick than drag on too long.
I agree.
Unless, of course, you're Opeth, and then your songs could be
just 20 minutes is fine.
Yeah. Fair enough. And I have 2 more questions for you. But when it comes to your live presence, it's going to be my first time seeing Orthodox on this tour. Is there maybe a similar energy, or is there any similarity between bringing this material live as songwriting? Is there anything similarly creative about it, or do you consider playing live and songwriting 2 completely separate art forms altogether?
We definitely have parts where there's riffs on the new album that I think are really stupid, but I'm that's going to be so much fun to play live, where we have to keep it on the record. So the live performance is definitely present when you're thinking of things, also because a lot of the drums that Austin and Mike wrote for this record, we were programming, and I was like, hey, make sure you can do that live. That's really fast. But I I think in terms of the actual performance side, we're all pretty set in our ways of it's really just like if you're playing this kind of thing and you're just standing there, then you're kind of wasting your platform.
Yeah.
And so our whole goal is to just like none of us are really intense people. We're all pretty open, welcoming people, but the stage is literally like a place for performance. So we want to be intense. We want people to feel jarred.
Do you almost have to like practice crowd interaction or stage presence?
Oh, God. I mean, I've been doing this we've been touring since 2013, so I've had enough practice, and I've fucked up enough times and learned what I'm good and what I'm not good at, and to the point where now we really, in terms of crowd interaction, once we start, we don't stop.
Yeah.
I don't leave. I don't do the whole, hey, how's everybody doing? Like, we don't stop it because if the whole goal is momentum and intensity, the moment that you stop the car, it has to, shake back, and to get it to go again, you're never able to start at the same speed you stopped at.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, messing up a song it may be easy to shake off, but like having a socially awkward stage banter in between, I think is
Bro.
one of the hardest things.
last night was our first show in 604 days, and if you could just go down the list of like technical difficulties you could have, we had them. So we ended up having to cut 4 songs. I just had to stand there with my back to the crowd like, well, I've already said everything I know to say. I'm not going to sit here and talk about politics. So, like, I guess let's hope this gets fixed soon.
That's why you play 20 questions.
Yeah, right. Jesus Christ.
Yep. or maybe have like a couple riddles or so.
I personally am not. Anytime somebody's like, anybody know some jokes? I'm like, all right, I'm going to go outside. I'm good.
Yeah, fair enough. And the final question I wanted to ask you is kind of going back to what we talked about earlier with like the different genres. We talked about hardcore and metal. Now, I had a discussion with Campbell of Lamb of God about this because I never really understood how somebody could love hardcore and not like metal, because to me, Iron Maiden and Judas Priest is just as brutally honest as Agnostic Front or Sick of It All or any new school hardcore band. But to you, what would you say is the biggest difference between hardcore and metal? And really, sum it up, kind of the most pressuring question, what is hardcore? How would you define it?
Oh, God. This is on camera, too.
Yep.
So hardcore to me, I think it's becoming more of a representation than it even is a genre, because there are so many bands that fall under the hardcore umbrella that, like, if you were to actually look at what their genre is, they're not a hardcore band. You look at the Acacia Strain, they're not a hardcore band, but those dudes, the mentality they bring, the way that they interact, the, like, heart that they have for what they're doing is very much the same, like, hardcore mentality that those morals are built upon. And I think the real dividing line between the two is just the size of the room, the level of interaction, and the age of the crowd is really like what really draws the difference between hardcore and metal. And I think like I would never call us a hardcore band, but we as people are very much like hardcore kids.
Yeah, it's
That's
more
what-
of an adjective.
Yeah, there are definitely bands out there that are straight up hardcore bands. Like One Step Closer just put out a fucking awesome record. There's, Life's Question, Hangman. There's so many incredible, like, genuinely, like, genre-wise hardcore bands. And when you listen to the difference in, like, what they are versus what we are, it's pretty notable. But, like, in the way that we approach a show, a way that we approach the crowd, the way that we approach our branding, our merchandise, as well as, like, how we just get there is all so similar that is, I think, more so what, to me, and this is going to be different in every person you ask, that to me is what hardcore is more of a mentality than a genre.
And you know what? I've gotten many different answers. I've interviewed Roger Merritt of Agnostic Front. I've interviewed the folks in Twitching Tongues and Harm's Way, and all of them. And I interviewed the Acacia Strain before, and you know what? They all have different answers, and that's why it's like one of my favorite questions to ask. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, man. Happy to do it.
Awesome conversation. Is there just anything else with Orthodox you'd like to promote? You have this tour right now with the Acacia Strain. Can we be expecting some new music soon? This will be uploaded by midnight, so if it hasn't been announced yet, don't say it here.
Nothing that I can speak on in terms of performance. We are on tour with the Acacia Strain, Kubla Khan, and Dying Wish until fucking Christmas. So come see one of those shows. Otherwise, Body and Soul, we just put that out in the middle of October. To me, it's the most crushing song we put out to date. And new music coming in 2022 in terms of time frame, we don't know yet, but hopefully we'll have those answers in the coming months.
Yeah, you'll tell me when I turn the camera
Oh, yeah.
off. But thank you so much.
course,
Everybody, we are here with Orthodox. New stuff coming very soon. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.